First impressions are important, and a game has a chance to make them only once. Sometimes it can overcome a bad first impression, sometimes not. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx, 10 most tedious opening levels in video games. Starting off at number 10 with Skyrim. The very first stretch of the game is long, slow, and you really just barely interact with anything at all. And you know what? A lot of people who really like making characters, and I know more than a few of those people, you got a long intro to sit through before you're allowed to go to that character creator. This intro is particularly annoying further than that for people who like to mod the game, because most of the time, to be 100% sure a mod's gonna work right, you gotta do a fresh save. It's so annoying that people use a mod called alternate start live another life to skip the opening. Like a mod to get to the mod quicker. Honestly, it's not that bad, but like the 30th time it is that bad. If you love the game and play it a lot, as I did through the years, I don't necessarily do it as much anymore, you really start to hate this intro. Moving on to number 9, Kingdom Hearts 2's entire opening sequence, where you play as an entirely new character, and the location is just like disconnected from literally anything that has anything to even vaguely do at all with the first Kingdom Hearts. Not that Roxas is like bad or anything, but the first time I played it, I actually got kind of confused, thinking like, wait, are they just telling the same story again with like different locations and characters? But because Kingdom Hearts is this bizarre franchise storytelling, if you didn't play a Game Boy Advance game, Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories, you don't have any idea why Sora, the actual main character of even this game that you're not playing as right now, is in this white egg thing. The gameplay is also really dull. You're just like doing errands. And in the end, it doesn't even matter because Roxas turns out to not be actually real. It's complicated. I'm not even going to try to explain it because it's not like regular complicated. It's Kingdom Hearts complicated. But it's still one of the most bizarre openings ever and just a slog to get past. At number 8 is Final Fantasy XIII, The Tunnel. Right, so Final Fantasy games can have pretty slow starts, but that's one problem this game doesn't have. It gets right to the action. Whether that's for better or for worse, I can't tell you. It's got an entirely different problem than like a slow start. The entire opening section, just about half the game, is basically just one long straight line. You do not get an open area to explore until chapter 11. The game has 13 chapters. For a series that's famous for overworlds and towns being like, oh, the game has opened up. This is the full game. You're playing the full game now. The opening of this game is a shock when you look at the map and you just see that you're going in a straight line for the next really long period of time. Basically, the game doesn't have any of the dungeon crawling, interactions with NPCs, or exploration that really makes Final Fantasy great. I mean, it does have a great combat system. I enjoyed the combat in Final Fantasy XIII a lot, but that's basically the only reason to play it. The sequels did a lot to kind of go somewhere with that, thankfully, but The Tunnel. When does the intro in this game actually stop? At number 7 is Nier Automata, The Prologue, which is long, and I mean, it's actually a really good prologue, but it's also really frustrating because of its lack of checkpoints. And you die, and that just, I mean, it sucks all the enjoyment right out of it. Because it's this really long sequence with a shoot 'em up part, a fairly long level part, and a bunch of bosses, and you have to beat all of it without saving. Like, if you're playing it on hard, which a lot of people who play Platinum games do, like, they view that as even kind of the point, it is very easy to die in this section. And if you die at any point in this hour-long sequence, you go right back to the start. Now again, I want to reiterate, it is a good sequence and an enjoyable sequence. It's probably the only one on here I would really genuinely categorize as something I enjoy going through pretty much every time. However, it is still on this list of the worst intros because it's so easy to get irritated with if you die. If you don't die, it's a pretty good intro though, so keep that in mind at least. At number 6 is Red Dead Redemption 2's Chapter 1 Coulter, which is an incredible game, but if you just want to get to the open world section where you have the freedom to go cowboy wherever you want, you have to get through this beginning section first, and the gang is hiding out in the snowy north, biding their time, talking to each other a lot, and it can be kind of tough to sit through, at least after the first time. Like, it's pretty long, and it's basically entirely scripted, so you're pretty much locked into completing story missions until you get to the actual open world. which is in Chapter 2. It's this very slow, like I said, methodical intro, and if you're playing the game primarily for the story, it is actually really engrossing. But again, if the whole point of you playing Red Dead Redemption 2 is to be cowboy wherever you want, it is incredibly restricting. So conditionally enjoyable, but it's easy for it to kind of not be enjoyable. At number 5 is Metal Gear Solid 5, the Phantom Pain's opening hospital sequence, which is, I mean, it's a lot. It is a really long, basically interactive cutscene. It also has almost nothing at all to do with the rest of the game, which is an open world stealth action game without a lot of story content, and this is like the bulk of the story. Once you get through this sequence, like, the story stuff is so sparse in this game. In fact, it was kind of disappointing for me. The first time around, I was like, this is kind of pretty badass setup. I'm looking forward to the story. And then I didn't see much story. I mean, I did get an amazing open world game, and I'm not complaining about that, but upon return to this same intro, I found myself a little bit resentful in a weird way. It also doesn't really play a lot like the rest of the game, and it doesn't really tutorialize anything or tell you anything or teach you anything. It's just kind of a long sequence you're stuck in. There are some really cool moments, but like I said, after one time through, it kind of exposes itself as a bit weak. At number 4 is The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, the intro to Ordon Village. You're basically stuck herding goats and fishing for over an hour before the actual game starts. And yeah, why? What reason? Is it to teach you a lot about the game? Oh yes, it definitely is to teach you a lot about the game. But here it's perhaps a bit too much. Like, you're really tutorialized here. It takes a long time to actually get started with this game for real, and you have to go through all the tutorials in Ordon Village, become a wolf, go through Hyrule Castle, and then return to Ordon, get your equipment back, and then the game actually starts. Yeah. To call that a little bit too much for me is an understatement. At number 3 is Fallout 2, The Temple of Trials, a long dungeon crawl with almost no equipment fighting boring enemies in a dull area. Obviously my favorite thing in the world. I have a really big question about this one that no one can seem to really answer. Yeah, why is there a giant ancient temple in a post-apocalypse game? It doesn't matter. Maybe that could just exist. I don't know. But there's no party members. There's no, like, role-playing stuff. It's just a long area with a lot of tutorials. Like, most Fallout games have really good intros, including the original Fallout. You know, the one directly before Fallout 2. And, yeah, they're just kind of like, better tell newcomers how to play the game. That makes sense, right? It's not intriguing. Like, the temple is not something that you learn anything about the world from. It's just a big drag, and I don't enjoy it. I'm sorry, Fallout 2. You're great in many other ways, but the intro is not one. At number 2, the tutorial mission in Driver. Like, in all honesty, you knew we were going to mention this one. This is the classic thing that this list is about. This is one of the hardest parts in the entire game. It's ridiculous that they even make you do it as a tutorial. Every aspect of the game after the tutorial seems significantly easier and more fun to get through. And most people just gave up and played the free play mode rather than bother finishing the tutorial. Like, okay, so Driver is a game about pulling automobile stunts. The tutorial is about ostensibly teaching you how to do that. However, instead, it requires you to perform precision stunts under a very strict time limit that will fail you so easily. Like, it's like if Battletoads was here, like, let's teach you how to play. And then it just dunked you into the hardest part, the motorbike part. That's basically Driver's tutorial mission. It's all a relative breeze after that. And finally, at number 1, the opening levels of both the original Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, as well as Coder 2, Taris in the first, and the Pegaris mining facility in the second. They're both long, they're both slow, and they're both not terribly interesting. And considering that both of these games are incredibly interesting, rich in storytelling, and phenomenal sources of Star Wars lore, that sucks. Taris introduces you to most of your party, and there's a lot of questing and character information, but the story doesn't kick in until after Taris gets blown up, so it all feels really, really useless once you get to that point. The Pegaris, however, in 2 is just a really long dungeon crawl with a boring mystery surrounding the whole thing. It goes on for way too long. Your character pretty much is by themselves, so they're not having interactions with NPCs in the party. No siree. The things that these games are known for is not what you go through the first hour or so. Both areas are basically just gray hallways. They're probably the most boring environments in either game. Were any of these in your bottom 10 intros for games of all time? Or do you have some suggestions? Leave us a comment, let us know what you think. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week, and the best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription. So click subscribe. Don't forget to enable all notifications, and we'll see you next time right here on gameranx.